My presentation is going to be a bit of a reality check. So it might be that the two communities that I represent are the odd ones. In case we are not so odd, we have something to tell you. And I'm more interested in sort of an interaction and some feedback. So I'll try to be a bit quicker so that I have more time for discussion. I represent among the 6 people who worked on this project. So I needed a second slide because there was not enough space for all the institutions, but we also represent 2 K centers, a B center and a C center. So at least we tried to at least cover some grounds. We hope we sort of established that. My story starts with the FAIR principles. And our claim is that at least our 2 communities have not been looking into one of the sub parts of fairness, which is usually referred to as R1.3, where it is sort of claimed that metadata needs to meet domain-relevant community standards. And we believe that domain-relevant is not computational linguistics, CLARIN already, but is basically drilled down to far more focused communities. And I will give an overview of 2. One is the translation and interpreting studies community. And this is how a corpus looks like to an average user. This is the Hamburg Sprachinstitut. It sort of looks similar to something that then can be translated into the VLO. The point is that a more specific metadata platform has far more information on something that yesterday someone said that language is our bread and butter, which is true. The point is that if we have one language label for people in interpretation studies, this is sort of the very basic of where they start. But they drill down on what exactly it means to be a language, and then they have their source language and they have their target language between which the interpretation happens or the translation. They also have corpus processing. They're more interested in sort of certain things that happen while the corpus is being created. And we also recognize that this happens with many other communities as well. Anonymization, transcription, annotation, alignment are just some of the keywords. And what they produced is a metadata schema, which is far more fine-grained than any of the metadata available on the platform, on the like VLO or DSpace like platforms. So they have created their own platform, which is a metadata deposit, which has the possibility to deposit metadata, also to search for metadata. It also is a corpus repository of kind and also allows for content search. The point is that they needed to spend some low 5 figures to an external company to get this implemented, which is good for them because they had the money. I will now come to a community that I was more involved into creating a metadata schema, and we don't have the money, so we rely on things that are available within CLARIN, and there things become more difficult. So I'm representing the learner corpus research community. This is a corpus within this community, typical DSpace representation. This is a VLO representation. I call this sort of a half additional view because more or less it is a re-representation of the metadata that it already exists. In our case, we do have one special additional view for people looking for corpora, which is the resource family. This is the same corpus representation that you've just seen in the resource family, which will change soon enough. But my main point is that for learner corpora, language is yet another term that is sort of the tip of the iceberg, because we start with target languages as the one that you want to learn. But there is at least, in this case, the first language. You see that all of those languages within first language were not even listed in a resource family. And possibly they were listed in the VLO, but then the question is whether this is actually like the only interesting tidbit that you want to know, that all of those languages are somehow represented. And then when we actually get to what it means to be represented, I'll give you a bit of an overview of how the actual metadata schema looks. I will not explain it in detail, but I will sort of give you enough information so that we can have this discussion afterwards, which basically is that the metadata schema for L2 data is composed of some core components which you believe are important for all the corpora within this domain. And then there are different types of corpora, data collected depending on how it was collected, depending on whether it's a type of corpus like sign language, depending on whether it's multimodal. So there is a sort of a cascading necessity to fill in certain metadata, but others not. The whole metadata schema looks a little bit like that. In the middle, you have this corpus metadata, the main component. And then it's sort of surrounded by more interesting bits and pieces from the community. And just to go back to this language iceberg that I talked about. So for learner language data, it is important to have an understanding of what is the language background of a speaker, of usually the learner. And there we go into what are the languages that are spoken at home? What is the language that the languages usually? So that's also a point. We usually talk about multiple languages. The languages spoken at home. The languages that this person considers to be the sort of the first languages with the person's peers, languages at school during education. Like there's a whole lot of what languages are interesting. There's also about the target language and the exposure of how was this person exposed to different languages and so forth. What I want to say is that the development of these two communities led to two independent metadata schemas, where one has about 170 elements, 45 obligatory ones in 8 components. The other one has 95 elements with 22 obligatory ones and 10 components. There is a certain control of the vocabulary, so there are certain things that are basically just lists of things that you need to select. But the point is that we talk about a huge amount of interesting things for the community, which at the moment are not really transferable into anything that is even our B center, D space infrastructure doesn't really cater for that initially. And then out of those two metadata schema, two further things developed. So in the LC metadata in the learner language community, we put ourselves into the community relevant association. The LCA is the Learner Corpus Association for the community. And we started a working group there and sort of handed over the further development into this working group or multiple task forces. And for the unique metadata, well, as I said, they were able to create this platform because they had the money. And so far, they have the platform, they have the user interaction. They do know about SIMD, and they have an interest in bringing those things together. But at the moment, they don't have the money anymore, and no one's working on that. We don't have any money, but we still keep working with it. We also want to go into the SIMdification of our metadata schema. We already have started, so they're in the CLARIN SIMD infrastructure. There has already been like a creation of learner language corpus data schema. We do know about the SIMD forms, which we will be using or are in contact. And then the big question, this is sort of where the discussion might start, is how do actually those people who are interested in this data interact with all of this back-end infrastructure knowledge that we build up? Because a SIMD form that does cater to those who want to input this data is still no good for anyone who's interested in searching for data. Our current idea is to use a custom VLO, which is sort of a story of itself. And so the question is, what do the CLARINs, and I mean sort of CLARIN Eric, I mean the CLARIN B centers, which we represent in parts, the C centers and the K centers, thank you. How can they help each other? Because we believe that there are many communities out there who will, in the process of being forced to verify their data because of the grant, sort of the money that is being given to them gets more and more restricted to, you need to make your data available, which means that they will realize that going through all that trouble makes more sense if they do have a metadata schema that caters to their needs much more than some standard data schema. Some at least. And I think it's not about if, but when. Our suggestion, just sort of as a side note, is to include the community in this process of building this metadata schema. You can read up on how we did this in our paper. It's sort of forums and email interactions and going to conferences and doing the legwork, basically. But my question is, how do we, as CLARINs, can help each other in the process for all those around us who may not have the money to build this system as this one community luckily had? And sort of my final words would be then, I don't think anyone believes that I want to replace anything, but I want to have something that sort of, in addition to what we already have and what we have already been building as infrastructure, caters more to the individual communities. And I do think that CLARIN should take a more prominent role in going forward with these initiatives. Coming back to my initial sort of reality check, maybe we are the odd communities who sort of needed that, and now we still need to figure out how to solve our problem, and maybe no one of you believes that this will sort of come sooner or later to you. But in case I'm wrong, I would be interested in your sort of feedback on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation. I think you touched upon a very interesting topic, and I think this is a topic that concerns us all. If I understood you correctly, just to make sure I got it right, so you are proposing somewhat a hierarchy of metadata standards, I guess. So CLARIN has already CMDI schemas that we use that are more or less applicable for our community. And then if you look at sort of zoom out and look at EOSC, they have, or DataSite or schemas like that, they are more general. And we should be compatible with those as well. And then from the CMDI standards that we use, you propose that we should also be able to go the other direction into a more specific. And I personally think that is exactly the way we should be going, because I mean, at CSC in Finland, we have a metadata from various different communities, and there's always this pressure of creating this metadata schema that fits it all. And I think it will never work. No person, no astronomer is going to use a metadata schema that also fits linguistics and vice versa. So we have to think of this hierarchy, and we have, I think, the things in place like PIDs. But if we can really say that this simple DataSite metadata snippet refers to the exact same dataset as this CMDI snippet, and that refers to the same dataset as the, I can't remember your specific standard now, the
meta.
Yeah. So that they are all connected, that it's clear that this is not just something else than the other, but that they are all connected. I think we need to really work towards this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're not completely odd. Yes.
I have more like a comment than an actual question, just to say that we also have in Switzerland a working group working on metadata for learner corpora. We already had contacts with Magali, but my comment is just to say that it is an actual problem that we have by trying to standardize these metadata is that they don't fit to communities that they really have very complex and need very complex metadata schemas to describe their resources. We try to organize a small survey to see also the reasons of why some corpora are not open, because that's also an issue with access to these data. But practically, it might be, at least for learner corpora, also interesting to look at other countries as well. They might have the same issues that we can all, address them and maybe find some solutions together from the community perspective. And then, on the other hand, from the CLARIN perspective. So roughly just to say that I thank you for the contribution, and we are happy to discuss further also maybe in other contexts these same questions that we also have.
Yeah, gladly. I mean, we try to incorporate the community via CLARIN, but also via the LCA, via conferences that were more targeted toward the community. If you've been in contact with Magali, then obviously there has been sort of the general idea of there is something happening into this direction. And okay, I mean, if we need more contact and more exchange, yeah, I guess we're not at the end of the story of LC Meta.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for touching our sore elbows with this. And yes, the components and the profiles with the CMD, they are the match for this as well. But I think we should do it like you say, together, make sure that how can we get from people thinking 8 fields are much to 15, 37, 170, 512. I think we need to find the right people that can say, okay, but this schema will fit our domain-specific resource descriptions perfectly, and that will then work better. But if we go, like Martin mentioned, in a general way, no, we need to go more specific. And I agree with you with that. And we will definitely work with you on this as well, because we also have a lot of more profiles that we want to add. So thank you.
Yeah, just a final comment on that. So Alex König and myself, we were sort of the computational people in the group for the LC Meta, and we try to trim down the number of those fields. Like this is already the reduced one where we said, do you really need this? Are you certain? Does it make sense? So